The disappearance of Caleb, an avid hiker in the vast mountain range, had remained a mystery for years, leaving his family and the local community in a state of unresolved grief. It was during a routine trail maintenance that Marvin, a volunteer, stumbled upon a set of weathered hiking gear, unmistakably Caleb's, lodged between rocks far off the beaten path. As Marvin pieced together the clues from the found items, a chilling realization dawned on him about Caleb's possible fate. The weathered hiking gear felt like a punch in the stomach. They had searched for Caleb for years, but no one had ever found anything, which was strange as this gear wasn't even that far away from the path. Marvin crouched down and picked some of the pieces up, revealing a name tag clearly stating it belonged to Caleb. The name tag was almost unreadable, but there was a clear C and L enough to let Marvin believe this gear was valuable evidence. He quickly called 911, and within an hour the place was swarming with police officers. Marvin looked over his shoulder as the hiking gear was bagged into evidence bags and the spot was closed off with yellow crime scene tape, looking very ominous. They took Marvin to the police station for his statement, and he told them everything from beginning to end. He was hiking up the mountain for a routine trail maintenance check when he saw a bird picking at something blue on the edge of a cliff. Wanting to keep the trail clean, Marvin had walked up to the cliff to pick up whatever trash the bird was picking at, but it was no trash. "I called the police as soon as I realized who the gear belonged to," Marvin said, and the police officer seemed to believe him as he let Marvin go. He handed him a card. "Call me if anything new pops into your mind," the officer said, and the two of them parted ways. On his way to his car, Marvin looked at the card. "Officer Preston," he said quietly to himself. He recognized that last name from somewhere but couldn't remember where exactly. As he walked up to the parking area, he realized that his car was still at the base of the mountain. He sighed as he walked to the bus stop instead and rode the bus back to the mountain, or at least close to it. When he finally arrived at the mountain again, he saw that there were still many police officers, now together with their K9 dogs. The search for Caleb had sprung back to life after the finding of new evidence, and Marvin couldn't help but feel invested in it, having found the hiking gear himself. The only thing was he wanted to do more. But what? Once home, Marvin immediately Googled Caleb's disappearance. He got a strange feeling when the first news article popped up, and he suddenly realized where he recognized the last name Preston from. "Hiker disappears without a trace. Have you seen Caleb Preston?" The front page of an article read. Their family, Marvin muttered in disbelief. But Officer Preston hadn't seemed very happy or excited about Marvin's statement when they spoke. Marvin brushed it off as self-protection. Officer Preston probably didn't want to get his hopes up, but he Googled his name anyway. He discovered that Officer Preston was actually William Preston and that he had become an officer 1 year after Caleb went missing. Since Caleb went missing 2 years ago, that meant Officer Preston had only been an officer for a year. He was quite the newbie, Marvin thought as he closed his laptop for the night. It had been a long day and tomorrow was another day of trail maintenance, so he had to get up very early. He went to bed that night thinking about Caleb and what the new evidence would mean for the investigation, but he would soon find that out. The next morning, Marvin headed back to the mountain. This time he would be hiking a different trail, but it would still be up the same mountain. He saw the yellow crime scene tape in the distance but walked past it toward the other trail. Even though Caleb wasn't seen close to this trail, Marvin kept his eyes open for anything that stood out to him. After hiking the trail all the way to the top and stating that there was no maintenance needed, Marvin felt adventurous. He decided to go off the path and walk around. He wasn't looking to find anything specific, but the new evidence had made him curious, and he wondered if there was more. Little did he know he would find more than he would like. It didn't take him long to find boot prints in the mud, but he figured they were probably from one of the police officers. Still, he decided to follow the boot prints just to see where they would take him. The mountain was huge, and it was connected to a large forest with a river running through the middle, including various waterfalls. As the sun climbed higher, Marvin veered towards the parts of the mountain most hikers never visited. The trail faded under thick undergrowth, a clear sign that few ventured here. This uncharted terrain beckoned with its seclusion. As he pushed deeper into this forbidden zone, a mix of thrill and trepidation filled him. He knew this could be where the trail to Caleb started or abruptly ended. Marvin's boots crunched softly on the underbrush as he reminded himself that if questioned, he'd simply say he got lost during trail maintenance. It wasn't the strongest excuse considering his years of experience, but it was all he had. His heart pounded with the hope that he wouldn't need to use it yet, paradoxically, that he would, because that would mean he'd stumbled onto something significant. Progress was slow and painful. Each step took him through thickets that left his shins scratched and his pants torn. The sharp branches seemed almost malicious, snagging at him as if trying to protect their secrets. As he pushed forward, Marvin couldn't help but feel that every painful scratch was a rite of passage, drawing him closer to whatever lay hidden in this dense, unwelcoming scrub. Advancing became an ordeal as the forest grew denser with each step. The path home seemed more confusing, more intertwined with shadows and echoes. Marvin stopped, his breath heavy in the quiet forest air. Realization dawned: getting back wasn't just a matter of retracing steps, it was a puzzle. This deep into the wilderness he was truly lost, much like Caleb had been. Yet he pressed onward, driven by a mix of fear and resolve. Marvin decided he wasn't equipped for an overnight stay and turned to retrace his steps. He felt confident as he began to walk, stepping over the familiar logs and stones he remembered passing. But as minutes turned into more minutes, the surroundings seemed to echo each other, a repeating pattern of green and brown. His heart sank as he realized his plan to backtrack was unraveling. Despite his best efforts to navigate, Marvin faced the hard truth: he was lost. Every tree and bush looked like a clone of the last, and panic crept in as the forest seemed to shift around him. His excuse of being lost, once just a cover story, was now his reality. He was in deeper than he had planned, with no clear way back. Marvin pulled out his phone, the screen lighting up to show just one bar of service, a glimmer of hope. He dialed 911, the phone ringing emptily against the chorus of the forest, but the call dropped, and no amount of retrying could punch his voice through the thick canopy. Isolated and frustrated, he pocketed his phone, his mind racing for other options. Remembering the giant rock he'd heard about, rumored to be nearby, Marvin forced himself to focus. He recalled the descriptions from other hikers: massive, almost unnaturally so, with a flat top perfect for getting a good view. He moved with a new purpose, eyes scanning for the landmark that he hoped would give him a better chance of finding a way out or being found. After a taxing search, Marvin found the rock, its size more imposing than he'd imagined. Climbing its rough surface took effort, but he managed, pulling himself onto the flat top. Catching his breath, he looked around. The view was expansive, revealing the vast, unyielding wilderness. It was here he noticed signs of previous visitation, scratches and wear not caused by nature alone. Atop the rock, Marvin discovered carvings that sent shivers down his spine. The scratched sentences read, "Why isn't he picking up? Will they find me? Will I get out?" Each word, etched with desperation, echoed through Marvin's mind. The possibility that Caleb himself had left these messages added an intense personal connection to the cold stone beneath him. With newfound urgency, Marvin pulled out the card Officer Preston had given him and dialed the number. His finger hovered over the call button, pressing it with a mix of hope and anxiety, but the phone only returned to the home screen after several rings. No answer. Marvin's frustration grew as he stared at the screen, willing it to ring through to someone, anyone. Now, with 2 bars showing on his phone, Marvin felt confident enough to try the call again, this time to anyone who might pick up. He dialed numbers from his contacts. Each attempt met with the same result: silence. The ringing seemed to mock his situation, with every unanswered call amplifying the isolation of his surroundings. Resolved to his circumstances, Marvin decided to leave his own mark on the rock alongside Caleb's assumed messages. He carved Marvin and Caleb into the stone, the act giving him a small sense of control over his fate. As darkness settled around him and the temperature dropped, he huddled close to the rock, its cold, hard surface a meager shield against the night's chill. The first light of dawn was a relief to Marvin as he awoke to the warmth of the sun on his face. It wasn't long before another sound intruded on the quiet morning: the distant throb of helicopter blades. His heart lifted with hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the sound of rescue finally approaching. Even without a helicopter in sight, Marvin's resolve hardened. He was walking the same mysterious path Caleb had taken, experiencing the same isolation and desperation. This realization fueled his determination. He wasn't just on a hike anymore, he was on a mission. Caleb had been here, Marvin felt certain of it, and now he had to find out why and how everything happened. The hiking gear, the carvings on the rock, it all pointed to Caleb having been here. With each clue, Marvin felt a deeper connection to Caleb's plight. Standing on the rock where Caleb likely stood sent a shiver down his spine. It wasn't just proximity, it was as if he could feel the echoes of Caleb's presence urging him on. Marvin carefully slid down from the rock and started circling it, eyes scouring the ground for any sign, any clue that might indicate which direction Caleb had gone from there. The underbrush was thick, but Marvin pushed through, determined to uncover anything that might have been overlooked. Every snapped twig, every displaced stone could be the clue that led him to Caleb. As he rounded the base of the rock, something unusual caught his eye, a piece of wrapping paper, part of it sticking out of the earth like a marker. Pulling it free, Marvin wondered about its origin and significance. It was then his stomach growled, reminding him of more immediate needs. He hadn't eaten since the previous afternoon, and his body was starting to feel the effects. Realizing he needed energy to continue, Marvin decided it was time to find something to eat. His eyes began to scan the surrounding area for any edible plants or berries. Food was sparse, and while his mind was on Caleb, his body urgently reminded him of the basic need to eat. He stepped carefully, looking for anything that could be safely consumed. Marvin knew enough survival skills to identify safe berries to eat. He gathered a handful, aware that such meager pickings wouldn't fully satisfy his hunger, but grateful for anything to sustain him. Each berry was a burst of energy, tiny as it was. Fortified even just a little, he felt better equipped to continue his quest for Caleb and hopefully a way back. With some sustenance in his belly, Marvin felt a renewed sense of purpose. Now more focused, he continued through the forest, eyes peeled for any sign of Caleb or a path leading out of the wilderness. Each step was driven by the hope of unraveling the mystery that had brought him here and the belief that finding Caleb was key to finding his own way out. Eventually, Marvin reached the riverbank, where he scooped up handfuls of cold water to wash his face. The refreshing chill was revitalizing. He imagined Caleb standing in the same spot, using the river in the same way years ago. The thought connected him to Caleb even more deeply. A shared moment across time through the simple act of touching the water. Marvin pushed forward, imagining he was tracing Caleb's exact footsteps. He thought about what Caleb might have done, where he might have walked. This imaginary guidance helped Marvin choose his path, making each decision with the mindset of following Caleb's journey. It was as if he was piecing together a puzzle, with each step a potential clue to the past. As he walked, the forest seemed to come alive around him. Sounds of rustling leaves and the occasional snap of a twig suggested movement nearby. Marvin couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching him, tracking his every move. The wilderness, while beautiful, held a menacing quality as he ventured deeper, each noise amplifying the sensation that he was not alone. As Marvin walked deeper into the forest, he suddenly heard voices. Moving quietly toward the sound, he hoped to find someone who could help him, but his steps halted when he caught sight of a police uniform through the trees. The sight of law enforcement should have been comforting, yet here in the wilderness, it felt strangely out of place. The uniform stood stark against the natural backdrop of the forest, making Marvin pause. Something about the scenario felt off. He was so far from any usual patrol routes or hiking trails. The presence of the police here, deep in the forest, added layers of confusion and apprehension to his already anxious mind. Drawing closer with caution, Marvin recognized the voice speaking. It was unmistakably Officer Preston's. The recognition sent a jolt through him. Why was Preston here in such a remote part of the forest? Marvin crept closer, his curiosity piqued but his nerves on edge, hiding behind a thick tree. Marvin strained to hear Officer Preston's conversation with a woman in hiking gear about Caleb's disappearance. Just as he leaned in to catch more details, he snapped a branch underfoot, shattering the quiet and startling the two. Panicking, Marvin bolted through the underbrush, hearing Preston shout but not pursue him. This lack of chase stirred suspicion in Marvin's mind as he slowed to catch his breath. Determined to get a better view, Marvin climbed a giant rock, scanning the forest below for any signs of Preston or unusual activity. His phone suddenly vibrated, showing Preston's name on the caller ID. Torn between curiosity and caution, Marvin decided not to answer, slipping the phone back into his pocket. He gathered some berries to regain energy before returning to where he last saw Preston and the woman. Following fresh boot prints leading away from the site, Marvin found an open field near the river with makeshift children's toys scattered about. Intrigued, he watched from the tree line as the woman reappeared, gathered the toys, and walked back into the forest. Marvin discreetly followed her along a self-made path lined with flowers, which led to a quaint cottage. There, she was greeted by two children, whose laughter filled the air, adding to the surreal beauty of the hidden place. Summoning his courage, Marvin knocked on the cottage door and was shocked to see Caleb answer. Caleb's surprise mirrored Marvin's, as he had never expected anyone to find his secret retreat. Marvin quickly explained how he had found Caleb's hiking gear and followed the clues. Caleb's expression shifted from shock to cautious interest as he listened, bridging the gap between his mysterious disappearance and the unexpected encounter. Caleb revealed that his disappearance was deliberate. He had staged a scene suggesting a tragic accident to escape his old life. Only his brother, Officer Preston, had supported his drastic decision, subtly manipulating the investigation to keep Caleb's location secret. Marvin listened intently, realizing the depth of Caleb's desire for a new beginning, far removed from his past. Finally, Caleb asked Marvin to keep his location a secret, understanding the importance of this sanctuary for his family's peace. Without hesitation, Marvin promised to tell no one, sealing a bond of trust formed through his extraordinary journey into the unknown.